What's going on, everyone? Today we're breaking down all things about the 2025 Buffalo Bills as we continue the Fantasy Life Show's team preview series. Specifically today, we'll be touching on if James Cook is still worthy of RB1 status despite his ongoing contract disputes, if Josh Allen is really worth a third-round pick in Fantasyland, and whether or not we should be buying a potential third-year breakout from Mr. Dalton Kincaid. So accordingly, let's get right into it. It is the opening drive presented by DraftKings, myself, Ian Hartitz, and Dwain McFarland. Again, getting you locked in on all things with the Buffalo Bills. And Dwain, really the big, media story for this team has been the status of James Cook. Wants to get paid. He's been very vocal about this, him and his brother Dalvin, on social media throughout the offseason. How concerned are you, if at all, that James Cook will ultimately miss snaps because of this contract dispute?
I mean, I don't think we can completely dismiss it. The problem is, I'm not good at predicting whether or not players are going to report. I mean, the only thing I know to go by is the longer that they're away from the team, the worse it typically is for fantasy. We want the players working out with the team. We want them integrated into the offense. We want them in shape. So there are other things, even if you sign late, there's some research out there that shows that can be problematic early in the year. So we'd rather really avoid all that. But when it comes to predicting it, Ian, this early in the offseason, still sitting here in June, I just don't think there's a lot we can do with it other than maybe slightly discount where we are with James Cook. The further we go along, I think the more we might need to start moving him down the ranks, because not necessarily that means he's not going to sign, but we do know that there could be other issues that come along with him signing late.
With Cook, obviously, again, the contract thing is the biggest issue. Newsflash, everyone, you cannot score fantasy football points if you're not on the football field. But it's also a matter, Dwayne, where I know you've actually wrote about some of the potential regression we could see from Cook, just because, again, it was surprising to see him score that many touchdowns last season. Of course, many were of the longer variety. He is a very good football player. For my money's worth, he looked like one of the best football players on the field during that AFC Championship loss to the Chiefs. But man, if we would have just painted out, the 2024 breakout for Cook, just starting with the fact that he actually had 42 fewer touches than he did in 2023 is wild to me. He didn't exactly take a step forward as a receiver either. I mean, we do have Ray Davis and Ty Johnson there. Let's just say, Dwayne, that they'll figure out the contract. James Cook is back in his usual role in week one. I mean, do you necessarily see yourself even ranking him inside the top 12?
I'm gonna like James Cook. I think he's a very talented player. It's funny because mostly what I get, whenever I talk about James Cook, the main thing people think of is the touchdown regression stuff that I've talked about. But even though that's likely to come down, I mean, whenever we look at James Cook, he's just a very talented player. I mean, if you look at him over the last 2 years, he's averaged 4.7 and 4.9 yards per carry with 237 and 207 attempts. So I went back to 2011, and we have only seen very few, running backs be able to eclipse those numbers 2 separate years with that many carries. Obviously, James Cook is one of them. Aaron Jones, CMC, DeMarco Murray, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott, Jamal Charles, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, LaShawn McCoy, Mark Ingram, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Todd Gurley. That's a really good list to be on. I mean, James Cook is good at football. I know he's not this huge yards after contact guy, but he really reminds me, Ian, more of Jamal Charles, more of a before contact. I know your offensive line has a lot to do with that, but there are some guys, Ian, that are just so fast, right? And they know how to take those angles and eliminate the linebacker from the play without really having to make a big juke or cut move. And I do see that with James Cook. To your point, didn't really increase last year in his role in the receiving game, but I still think he's one of a handful of backs, 4 to 5, that I would say in the league that can really challenge linebackers and safeties at the second and third levels of the field. Do you always get those targets? No, you don't. But when we talk about the Bills, we don't really have this alpha target earner. So there is room for James Cook in a lot of ways, in my opinion, even though we think that these touchdowns are going to come down. He scored 16 last year. I think that there's still a lot of other paths for him still coming through for us on fantasy points. He could catch more balls. They could just decide, especially if they pay him, they could decide, hey, we're going to give him 60% of the work. Remember last year when everybody said, oh, man, there's no way that James Cook can get the carries inside the 5. Guess what? He did. That was the big role that he did take over last year. Went from 15% of the carries inside the 5 in 2023 to 48% of them. Now, obviously, the other half went to Josh Allen, and he's really good at that. But I mean, James Cook, it's not like all those touchdowns Ian came from inside the 5. He had scores from 1, 6, 5, 7, 2, 2, 6, 3, 6, 1, 1. Then he had one in the medium bucket at 11 yards, but he also broke off 4 long ones, has that big playability, 49 yards, 65 yards, 41 yards, 46 yards. So big playability, gets executes inside the 10-yard line. Yes, Josh Allen's going to poach some of those. We don't expect his touchdowns to stay the same, but could catch more balls, could get more carries. There's just a lot of paths for him. I think he's a good player. And obviously we've seen the drop back rate over expected drop since Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator. So they do like to run the ball, or at least that's what they've shown for the last year and a half. So I think he's right there on the borderline. But I think he's one of these players that could be very similar to Achane, could be very similar to what we talk about with Bucky Irving. All it takes is his team deciding, we're not going to limit him to 45, 50% of the snaps. We're going to let him play 60%. Yeah. And then you do have a top 12 running back on your hands.
Don't necessarily need 300 carries, to actually perform as an RB1 in the year 2025. 200 with that sort of explosive pass catching ability tends to be more than enough. So please, Cook, just get on that jug machine, whether you're, working out with the Bills or not. We cannot keep having these wheel route touchdowns, drop out of his hands. But hey, got to be pretty good to get that open in the first place in the NFL. So Cook, again, very good real life and fantasy player. Going to be a staple inside far more top 15s than not. Personally, Dwain, I will say round 4, some of these early drafts, I haven't been clicking his name a ton. This is about the range we see the Lamar Jacksons and Jaden Daniels of the world go off the board. And just, neck and neck against guys like Breece Hall, I haven't exactly been, again, getting a ton of James Cook. I have been getting a lot of Ray Davis in the later rounds, though. This is a situation where we only saw that one game on Monday night. If you're anything like me, maybe you were pissed off that we didn't exactly get the clearest reporting regarding Cook's status for that game. Regardless, we saw Ray Davis come in and look fantastic. I think he had over 140 total yards and was the clear RB1. We did not see Ty Johnson's status as the pass down back change. So for your money's worth, Dwain, is Ray Davis deserving of kind of that A-tier handcuff treatment with guys like Tyler Algier, Trey Benson, amongst others?
Yeah, I think he's right there. I mean, they do like to use a third back sometimes. I'm not going to let Ty Johnson keep me from going a step further with Ray Davis, though.
Hey,
his role
take it easy.
Man,
led the league in yards per touch last year.
Oh, yeah, whatever. The contingent value of if we do get James Cook holding out, yes, I think that Ray Davis is valuable. But I do think that's part of what's pushing Ray Davis's ADP up a little bit, is there's this chance that James Cook does hold out, right? And he misses games or, runs into some sort of issue. The other thing, though, with James Cook, we've all got him at running back 12 right now. So I've actually been clicking his name in drafts right now, because once he signs, I do think his ADP is going to climb. So I kind of like getting this exposure to him more in round 4, or he could push more towards a borderline round 3 pick once he signs his contract. Because the other thing that'll happen, how it goes, Ian, once he gets paid, it's going to be, they've got however many million reasons to hand this guy the ball more. Whether that's going to happen or not, we don't know. We don't always see more touches follow the contract dollars, but it will be a narrative that hits the streets. And at that point, I do think James Cook is, you're going to see his ADP rise. So I'm trying to get my shares now. Could it go wrong? Yeah, but I like the discount.
Certainly a good reminder. If you are sick enough to be drafting like Dwain and myself during these June and July dog days of the summer, it is a good idea to generally fade some of this news that more likely than not will turn out to be just fine by August. Good chance to sweep up some of those ADP discounts. So again, guys, this has been the opening drive presented by DraftKings. Basketball fans, the NBA Finals are here. The stage is set, the stakes are sky high, and every shot could be the difference between glory and heartbreak. There's still time to get in on the action with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. And right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll take home $300 in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using my promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. All right, Dwain, broke down James Cook because let's face it, he is the biggest storyline for this Buffalo Bills squad in Fantasyland, but make no mistake about it, the king of Buffalo is none other than Josh Allen, QB1 in your hearts and probably your fantasy ranks as well. After all the man has done is rip off top 2 fantasy finishes in each of the past 5 seasons. So with Josh Allen, again, having arguably the best floor ceiling combo at the position, maybe just save for Jaden Daniels, are you, Mr. Dwain McFarland, signing up to draft him in round 3 in 2025 fantasy drafts?
Yeah, I mean, I am. And it really does matter where you're drafting. That's underdog. If you look at ESPN, he's a late round 2 pick. You look at him on Sleeper right now, he's a mid round 2 pick. You look on Yahoo, also a mid round 2 pick. So once you start talking about those price tags, like the opportunity costs change up a little bit. Now there's also different formats there. On Underdog, you have to start 3 wide receivers, so it makes sense that the quarterbacks get pushed down the board just a little bit. On ESPN and on Yahoo, right, those are 2 wide receiver as far as like the typical league. You can change obviously the way your league's set up, but those are 2 wide receiver leagues if you're just going with the normal settings from those sites. So I could see a reason why we could see the quarterbacks push up a little bit. But man, the trade-off costs there, you're starting to look at Josh Allen versus Bucky Irving, Drake London, Trey McBride, and Ladd McConkey on ESPN versus whenever you're on Underdog, it's versus Tet McMillan, who we really like, Xavier Worthy, DJ Moore. But man, like when you compare Josh Allen to those players, you're like, what you're getting with Josh. The other thing that I will say, just as far as the early quarterback stuff, we talked about it a little bit with Jaden Daniels whenever we talked about the Commanders, is just, and Jalen Hurts as well, is this is a season where I am down for taking the early elite dual threat quarterback. There are only 4 of them. Obviously, Josh Allen is one of those. And the main reason being is that we do not have a candidate like Jaden Daniels this year. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more when we get to the Jets about Justin Fields, and he certainly offers some upside, but we know there's limitations as a passer. So I think this is one of those seasons where when we look further down the draft board, it's kind of, and we like to say, hey, what could I get later that I don't have to take now? Last year we could squint and say Jaden Daniels might, if you pass on the elite quarterbacks and take a different position and Jaden Daniels comes through, that gives you an edge in your fantasy draft. I just don't have another guy that I'm as confident about it, Ian. And you already mentioned it, when you talk about the floor and the ceiling, Josh Allen has one of the best floor and ceilings in our ceiling and floor projection model. That's how I know it's actually working correctly, folks, is when you see Josh Allen at the top of it. Like Ian said, 18.8 fantasy points per game is his floor, ceiling of 28.9. Obviously, he hasn't reached that. He's been 24, 26, 25, 26, but he's been right around that. But you could imagine a spike season. If he does hit that big spike season, there is a chance that he even scores more. So absolutely love Josh Allen this year. It does come down to those trade-off costs, though, Ian, depending on where you're drafting.
I will say when you have been taking these, very early round quarterbacks, we'll say top 50 overall picks, they have not made a habit of busting, okay? More times than not, you have not, been sitting there afterwards saying, oh my God, this was a terrible decision. Now, again, you draft Lamar, Josh Allen, round 3. You want a top 5 finish. If they're finishing, QB7 or QB8, you're not exactly thrilled about that. But I ran the numbers, there's only been 22 quarterbacks with this top 50 ADP over the last 5 years. Average finish, fantasy points per game is QB7. Median finish is QB5. 13 of 22, 59% managed to post top 6 numbers on a per game basis. Really, the only 3 that busted and did not return even top 12 numbers. 2022, Justin Herbert, a lot of injuries in there, kind of sapped his rushing upside. 2023, Joe Burrow, again, had that brutal calf injury where he was a shell of himself for the first 5 weeks of the season. And then last year, yes, it was CJ Stroud and his way, that QB 28 finish. So all 3 guys, I think, not coincidentally, are more pocket passers, not Josh Allen, who's up there with Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels as really the most reliant quarterbacks on their legs in the league. You can throw Lamar Jackson in there when he's not throwing for 4,000 yards and 40 touchdowns as well. So I'm with you, man. It is a situation where when I've been, particularly round 3, round 2, a little bit, steep for my liking. But yeah, man, when I can get that one quarterback, it's great because you also, Dwayne, the opportunity cost on the other side of things is you don't really need to worry about the rest, all right? Best ball, yeah, we got to get a second guy to cover the bye week. But, man, you take Josh Allen in round 3, especially in redraft, you can absolutely be done. And even in a best ball league, feel free to wait until round 17 because it's like that quote about the Colts, back in 1998 when they asked, like, hey, how come we're not practicing without Peyton Manning? And the coach says, 18 goes down, we're effed, we don't practice being effed. So that's how I feel like when we're taking an early round quarterback or tight end.
Yeah, and I think you hit the key thing with your analysis is really like the landscape has changed for quarterbacks in the last 5 years. We now have multiple dual threat elite options, and those guys are going to be the ones that are the least likely to bust and they're the most likely to boom. If you go back, if I'm sure if you took that research and you took it back another 10 years, you'd find the opposite. You would actually find that a lot of the quarterbacks that people were taking in those early rounds, even if it was names like Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning, that they weren't getting the return on their investment because so much of that for those pocket passers comes down to that spike touchdown season. Now, there are certainly guys that can hold up over time and can be in that top 4 or 5 more often than not. But it is a lot better for these guys that run around, Ian, because we know the consistency year over year, as long as they're not like starting to, really get up there in age, as far as those rushing yards, it's something that we can really depend on. So that's a great call out by you. I think the last thing that I would say for folks, if you're thinking about, how you want to work it, you just got to look at the ADP for the sites and think about your 2v2 trade-offs, right? So on Underdog right now, would you rather take Josh Allen and have to get Rome Odunze as your next wide receiver, or would you rather go ahead and take a guy like Mike Evans or Devontae Adams and then get Joe Burrow as your quarterback later? Like, those are the kind of decisions you're making. I think you could make an argument for going either way, but like we talked about, it's the opportunity costs get higher on ESPN and on Yahoo. You're trading off a lot bigger names in round 2. You could be passing on a Devon Achane, right? So you're going with Achane, or you're going with Allen over Achane, right? And then that means that you're coming back around and grabbing a Joe Mixon or something like that as your running back instead of Achane. That's where, for me, and it starts to get a little bit dicey if I've got to pass on a player like a Devon Achane to get the quarterback, especially knowing that Jalen Hurts still falls in these drafts as well. Like, he's more of a round 3 pick on those sites. So you guys just got to make sure you check out the ADP. Of course, you can do that all over at fantasylife.com. You can check out the ADP tool. We've got all the data in there for ESPN. It's in there for Yahoo. It's in there for Underdog, in there for Sleeper. We've got a lot of different leagues covered.
And again, that is the hole to poke with Josh Allen's fantasy value. It's more so the players that you could be otherwise getting in rounds 2 or 3, nothing to do with the QB1 and NFL history in terms of fantasy points per game. So good stuff on Allen. But of course, it would be a lot cooler if Allen had, some better pass catchers out there, with all due respect to Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakur, and Dalton Kincaid. This specifically is a muddled wide receiver room at the moment. They have added some new faces. Elijah Moore, tearing up training camp, or OTAs, I should say, for seemingly the 5th straight year. Maybe we see Curtis Samuel have a little bit better health. Dwain's least favorite wide receiver in the league, Mac Hollins, is at least out of town. So again, Dwain, there's a lot of different names here. We've seen Joe Brady and company really be willing to spread things out. But at the end of the day, no offense in the NFL has scored more points than the Bills over the past 5 years. I would like to think we can get some value out of one of these wide receivers. Do you think it's just Khalil Shakur again, or could perhaps one of these other guys step up?
I think one of the other guys could step up. Shakur is still the guy, though, to make the bet on, I think, and he's still reasonably priced. I mean, after what he did last year, if we look at his range of outcomes using our model, the floor is 10.1 fantasy points per game in a PPR. Median is 12.9, but the ceiling is 17.7. This is a guy, Ian, that had a 25% targets per route run last season. His yards per route run was 2.15 after posting a 1.84 the year before. So he's on a good trajectory. Obviously, they decided to pay him. And there's just not a lot of proven competition around him. There's some guys we can talk about here that, like, when you squint, you're like, okay, there's a silver lining. They could break out. But Shakur, I think, he's your best bet. And he's not getting overpriced. And he could be like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? He's in that same mold if he's going to work underneath, intermediate. If suddenly the Bills get back to passing the ball a little bit more, and we know over these last 2 years with Joe Brady, basically the last year and a half, they have been more of a run-heavy team. But who's to say that doesn't have to change this year? They've lost some players on defense. Can the Bills continue to perform the way they have historically on defense? I don't know, man. There's some holes there. There's some aging players. There's a lot of things going on with their team. So when I looked at this, I went ahead and ran a couple of different scenarios here just as far as the drop back rate. Right now, I have it at 57.5%, which is where we were last year. The year before that, they were at 60. But the year before that, the Bills dropped back to throw 65% of their plays, Ian, one of the most heavy drop back teams in the league. So I just bumped that up to 62.5%. Just say it went up by 5%. It was more in line between kind of the middle, right, of where they've been over the last 3 years. That would move Khalil Shakur to 14.1 points per game as his median outcome in my projections versus the 12.9 where I have him at the 57.5. So you just got to remember, we can't be so certain that we know exactly how these offenses are going to work. Like, we're doing our best to guess it. But I mean, if James Cook, they don't see him like as an every down back and they don't pay him a big amount, like, it's not like we have a backfield that's just screaming, hey, we got to run the ball all the time. Josh Allen's getting less and less of the design rushing attempts, even though now he's Jalen Hurts now. He gets all the carries inside the 5, or at least he gets half of them, and he scores those touchdowns, which is also a big help for Allen. But man, if they suddenly need to pass more, like, I really like what Khalil Shakur could give us, and I think he's getting underrated just because they kind of dismiss him as being this slot receiver on a pass heavy or on a run heavy team.
yak beast. I mean, what he does with the football in his hands really is, the most special part of his game. But I'm with you, man. It's surprising to see, like this time last year, Shakur and Curtis Samuel were both kind of going in that wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 range because we weren't sure which guy was actually going to wind up leading the way. Clearly, Shakur, and accordingly, he got a nice 4-year, $53 million extension this offseason, finished as the wide receiver 37 in PPR points per game last year, and he's sitting there as the wide receiver 44 right now. So he's with some Packers players. He's with Stephon Diggs, Darnell Mooney, Josh Downs. I'm not saying I'm getting to that range and going, screw all these other guys. I need to draft Khalil Shakur every time. But again, if you did have to place a chip on who's going to be the most productive, why would you not go back to well with Shakur? I do think, especially in full PPR scoring, if you're on a team where you just need that floor production, Shakur can be your guy. What about beyond him, though, Dwayne? Because we did have Keon Coleman coming on strong, had the 125 yards and the 70 yards and a touchdown weeks 7 and 8. Unfortunately, had a wrist injury kind of derail the rest of his season. He should be more so locked into a consistent full-time role with Mac Hollins and Amari Cooper gone. That said, Josh Palmer went ahead and came to town on a 3-year, $29 million deal. And just in terms of what he can do as a route runner, kind of a different style of receiver than Keon, who's going to win more so in jump ball situations and maybe after the catch. So between Keon and Palmer, we'll even say, including their respective price tags, who have you been clicking more often?
Well, I would still click on Keon just because I feel like there's a better range of outcomes as far as like what the ceiling could look like. I think we know what Josh Palmer is at this point, right? It's very, very rare that we get a sudden breakout to wide receiver 1 from a guy of an archetype like Josh Palmer. When I say rare, like never. Like, might he turn into a wide receiver 2? That could happen, right? I mean, there's some paths here where Josh Palmer ends up being a valuable fantasy piece, but it's most likely, Ian, like an upside of a wide receiver 3 or more like a wide receiver 4 that we're flexing into our wide receiver 3 spot some weeks. So not that excited about Josh Palmer. Again, where he goes in drafts, he's draftable, but he's not someone that I really want to be having to plug into my lineups every week. Keon Coleman, like Kendall asked me this question last week on Untitled, and I had to give him a range of 1 to 10 on the breakout meter. And I gave him a 4. So it's not like I'm crazy about him, but I will admit that, like, if he does hit, like, the ceiling can be there. This is a guy that gets to work down the field. He could become really a menace inside the 10-yard line. It's not like they have somebody that's really gobbling up all those touchdowns down there. So Dalton Kincaid been a little bit of a disappointment in that area. And Shakir, we just talked about, like, he's never going to be this guy that's going to just thrive in a huge way inside the 10-yard line. Like, he might have a 10 touchdown season, but more likely to be like a 6 to 8 guy. So yeah, I like that upside for Coleman. The thing I will say is the comps, like using what he did in his rookie supermodel plus what he did in year 1, they're still not great. We're talking about Treylon Burks. We're talking about Devontae Parker, talking about Rashad Bateman, Corey Coleman, Quentin Johnston. So, I mean, there's Jalen Reagor. Sorry, I should just stop now. there's not a lot here to really
Parker, hang. All right. I always believe in Devontae Parker. I'm going down with the ship again.
Devontae Parker did have 1 year, guys, where he was fantasy relevant, and then he like faded again into oblivion. But again, like, there is a chance, and it's wide open as far as what the target competition looks like. So I think that's the thing that you got to keep in mind. So I'm not going all in on Keon Coleman, but I am sprinkling him into some of my drafts.
Look, if you think Keon's going to become the next Stephon Diggs in Buffalo, I want whatever you're smoking. But I do think there's an opportunity where we could see him be kind of what we hoped Gabe Davis was going to be more often. I mean, we were drafting Gabe Davis as a low-end wide receiver too after ridiculous 4 touchdown playoff game he had. And again, it's that similar archetype, a guy who can get down the field, a guy who has the faith of Josh Allen to say, F it, Keon or Gabe is down there somewhere. And I think in Keon's case, there is much more upside in terms of what he can do after the catch versus Gabe Davis, who, as Jetpack Galea loves to point out, is almost like one of those steamboats trying to turn around in some of his routes. So with Keon, again, kind of that wide receiver 5 range, I think there is boom or bust wide receiver 3 upside on the table. I don't even think it'd be particularly surprising, and you can certainly buy him at a fraction of that cost. So last point on Josh Palmer would just be, I get the fit, but man, it's 3rd and 9. You're trying to beat the Chiefs for once in January. You got man-on-man coverage. Do you really want Josh Palmer to be the guy that you're going through? All right. I mean, where was all the competition in Los Angeles this last year? All right. I know he had some, problems going up, but just to see not only Lab McConkey, but Quentin Johnston really put Palmer into a complete backseat in that offense that had a great had a great quarterback in Justin Herbert as it was. Again, tough for me to get fully behind that. So final point, Dwayne, Curtis Samuel, Elijah Moore, even Laviska Shenault. I mean, this wide receiver room is like a 2021 late round fantasy drafter's dream. Are you buying any of these guys with, a last round dart?
And they're all not wide receivers.
I know.
I don't understand the scouting department for the Bills. I don't get it. Even Keon Coleman, who, played on the outside last year, really where he thrived in college was in the slot. So I don't understand why they continue to just bring every potential slot player. Josh Palmer also has played outside, but I think you could argue his best fit as a chain mover would probably be more inside from the slot. So it's like, I don't know. It's like they're playing small ball here. And you don't like that because Josh Allen, right, should be really able to unlock these bigger plays down the field. Now, obviously, NFL defenses have adjusted. They're not giving up those big plays. And maybe this is part of what we're seeing with NFL offenses. They are going to go to more of these guys that can just work horizontally underneath, the coverage and get open against, all these underneath looks. I mean, maybe that's the way some of these NFL teams are going. We've seen it with the Seahawks. We've had other teams that we've talked about, like, where's the field stretcher on this team? And the Bills really are one of them. But to your point, I think if there is a guy that could do it, I think Keon Coleman is it. And so I do agree with you that he would be my next fit. If one of these other guys do break out, probably not someone we're drafting in most fantasy leagues, but could be someone that we're picking up off the waiver wire. Obviously, we'll monitor the camp news. We may be updating our stance on that here pretty soon. But if I were to put a chip like on another player, I do think we probably have to turn our attention to the tight end, Ian.
Yeah. And with Dalton Kincaid, now very reasonably priced in Fantasyland, Dwain. He's a mid-tier tight end too. You're going to see him anywhere from like tight end 13 to tight end 15 in more drafts than not. This is 1 year after he was going as a top 5 tight end, depending on who your fantasy provider was. So with Kincaid, obviously had the first round draft capital. I know just the lasting memory in everyone's mind is him dropping that miracle pass from Josh Allen to to end the season for the Bills. That sucked. I get it. But if you just looked at his analytics, you just looked at the metrics, you just kind of forgot everything you know about the guy, nameless, faceless tight end. There's a lot to like here, Dwain. I mean, 2nd in targets per route run last year, 9th in yards per route run, 8th in PFF receiving grade. The problem was that when the ball did go his way, his passer rating when targeted, that was just 23rd among 31 qualified tight ends. So I know you could point to drops there, but I don't know, man. There were some injuries there that maybe he's not getting enough credit for playing through. And honestly, when you do look at those specific targets, you can argue Josh Allen was very more at fault, again, if you believe in stuff like uncatchable target rate. So with Kincaid, again, does have that unfortunate reality where he's going to be splitting stuff with Dawson Knox, but the man's cheaper than ever, Dwain. I'm not certain he sucks at football, and we love the offense. So that seems like the sort of, profile we should be targeting in the late round tight end streets.
Yeah, I think he's a top 3 bet on this team. We talked about Shakur being like the one that we feel the best about. And then I think it really comes down to this, to Kincaid versus Keon Coleman. You lean to the receiver a little bit because we know that the ceilings can be higher. Like if you told me, okay, Keon caught, 70 balls for 1,200 yards, like it's just easier for a receiver to do that than to have a tight end, right, go off. Now, everything's obviously relative. You're just trying, all you need to do is just have a tight end that's a lot better than the rest of your league mates. And I do think that Dalton Kincaid could enter that conversation. Last year, he was playing with 2 different knee injuries. And if we go back and we look at his fantasy points per game before the injury, you guys can see right now on the screen, 9.5 in his rookie season dropped down to 7.1 last year. But if we look before the knee injury, he was actually averaging 9.8 PPR points per game. So really right in line with what we had from his rookie season, slightly better. And I'm feeling the eye rolls right now. Like, golly, really? We're signing up for 9.8 fantasy points per game. Well, just hear me out, guys. If you look at his targets per route run, actually went up last year, 26%. Yards per route run also went up, 1.62. The routes went down because of the injury. Over the second half of the season, his route rate dropped down to 53%. But before that, he was really playing a very similar role to what we saw in his first year. And again, we've become very spoiled with tight end breakouts happening in year 1 very recently because of Brock Bowers and what we got from Sam Laporta. But we have to remember that's still not always the norm for these guys. If you come in on a team that's got a player like Dawson Knox, who we don't think is great, but he is an NFL player. Like he can start on some NFL teams. That can make it harder for some of these guys to earn the playing time earlier in their career. So we shouldn't rule out the fact that Dalton Kincaid could get to that 80-85% route participation this year, Ian, and I like him. I've got him at tight end 15. It's not like I'm drafting him all the time, but I do like where he's priced. All those numbers that I share with you, targets per route run, yards per route run, all of those things are more in line with a low end to mid-range tight end 1 if you go back and look at data since 2011. So the underlying data is telling us there's something to like here with Dalton Kincaid, and we can say all the same things we said earlier about Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir. Like, there's no one here that's just this alpha, right? So the door is still open for any one of these guys or a few of these guys to step up and just become a bigger part of the offense. And I still bet that the Bills hope that it's Kincaidian. They did still use that first round capital. So I think that still gives them a little bit more than some of these other players that we've talked about.
Again, I know it's tough, Bills fans, but don't hate the player, hate the ADP. And right now, Dalton Kincaid still has some, decent, perhaps untapped upside and cheaper than ever in fantasy land. So certainly some of the target in those late round tight end streets. Takes us, though, Dwain, to our win total. It is sitting at 11.5, one of the highest in the league. And it will be a good, minus 155 juice or so to take that over. Bills in the last 5 years have won 13, 11, 13, 11, and 13 games. So are you willing to go over, Dwain, even though it is an odd number year?
I'm going to go under. I don't know, man. Like, again, we don't have the proven weapons on offense. Yes, you can spread it around. I know people are going to say, oh, well, Josh Allen has most efficient year ever. I remember saying that about Patrick Mahomes like 2 years ago after Tyreek Hill left. And then everybody's like, oh, crap. Wow, what happened to the Chiefs? Duh, Tyreek freaking left. So we have to remember that sort of thing is in the range of outcomes. The other thing, they made some nice acquisitions. I mean, they did add Joey Bosa to the defensive line. That's that's an upgrade over losing Von Miller. But at the same time, like, man, I just don't know that their defense is on the same level as what it's been. I know they're running the ball more. There are some playmakers like James Cook in the offense, but I'm still just not a huge Joe Brady fan. Like, I get it. They've tightened things up. It's worked well for them. But, man, do you really want to be running this style of offense and putting so much of it on the ground whenever you're trying to, make it to a Super Bowl? I just worry that the Bills, like, they're just living off of Josh Allen, man. And are they really wasting the prime years of his career? I think we could make an argument that they are. I really wish they would go invest more. I know they're trying. They tried with Kincaid. They tried with Keon Coleman. But I think that they need to be even more aggressive with some of the playmakers and things like that. So I'm going to take the under. 11.5 is a pretty high number. I know they've beat it 2 of the last 3 years, but I'm going to go with 11 wins instead of 11.5, Ian.
Man, bold move by you. I'm going to take the over here. Look, I think.
Well, have you taken an under yet? I think you've switched all of your picks to overs.
I promise I will take some unders eventually, but not today, Satan. I am taking the over. Look, the Chiefs have sent the Bills home in 4 of the last 5 Januaries. I think they finally get that monkey off their back. I think the Buffalo Bills, Dwain, take home the Lombardi Trophy this year. Josh Allen, for my money's worth, really has been the best quarterback in football over these past 2 seasons, with all due respect to number 15 in Kansas City. And despite some of the roster deficiencies you mentioned, man, the continuity and just everything they've done. This team is number 1 in the NFL in points over the last 5 years, and they've allowed the fewest points over the last 5 years. Okay, so again, I think if we just ran the simulations on what happened the last 5 years 100 times, there would be at least one Lombardi, chilling out in Buffalo by now. I think we will finally get one in real life after this season, but those are just my 2 cents. So stay tuned for future team preview editions here on the Fantasy Life Show, where I presumably will be forced to take a team under at some point, but again, not right now. So thanks again for tuning in, guys. For Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. This has been the Fantasy Life Show, and until next time, take care, everybody.